Dr Sandra Turcotte, la récipiendaire d'une chaire de recherche de la Société canadienne du cancer, chercheure scientifique à l'Institut atlantique de recherche sur le cancer, professeure adjointe au département de chimie et de biochimie de la Faculté des sciences de l'Université de Moncton.
Donc, notre laboratoire de recherche s'intéresse au cancer du rein, plus spécifiquement au développement de nouvelles thérapies. On vise à cibler spécifiquement les cellules cancéreuses sans atteindre les cellules saines, ce qui permettrait donc de réduire les effets secondaires au traitement. Pour ce faire, donc, on étudie un gène de suppression tumorale appelé von Hippel-Lindau ou VHL. Ce gène-là est inactivé dans plus de 80% des cas de cancer du rein. Donc, le gène ne peut plus faire son travail. Et nous, ce qu'on pense, c'est qu'en utilisant des petites molécules ou des drogues pour cibler ces cellules-là qui sont inactives en VHL, on arriverait donc à tuer uniquement les cellules cancéreuses. On a une jeune équipe de recherche. Parmi celles-ci, j'ai pu engager un assistant de recherche, aussi 2 étudiants à la maîtrise, dont une qui devrait terminer donc, au mois de décembre. Il y a aussi 5 ou 6 étudiants de premier cycle qui sont passés au niveau du laboratoire pour faire des stages de premier cycle. Donc, malgré qu'on est une jeune équipe, c'est dynamique et c'est des plus prometteurs. Dans mon cas, je suis aussi professeure à l'Université de Moncton, donc il y a une partie de mon temps qui est dédiée à l'enseignement, que ce soit au niveau donc, du premier cycle ou à la maîtrise ou au doctorat. Disons, depuis que je suis installée ici comme chercheur indépendant, je dirais que j'ai eu la chance d'être supportée financièrement par ma province, par le Nouveau-Brunswick, que ce soit par la Société canadienne du cancer, la Fondation de recherche en santé du Nouveau-Brunswick ou la Fondation d'innovation du Nouveau-Brunswick, mais aussi au niveau national par le programme Crescent qui s'intéresse donc à la formation des jeunes chercheurs qui travaillent dans le milieu rénal et aussi par la Société de recherche du cancer. Donc, ça nous permet justement d'avoir des gens dans notre laboratoire, d'établir des collaborations dans la province, mais aussi nationale et internationale avec d'autres personnes. À ce point-ci, la Société canadienne du cancer m'a donné la chance de réaliser mon rêve, soit d'être chercheur indépendant. Et je pense que c'est important que les gens qui ont contribué financièrement à l'établissement de ces chaires de recherche-là sachent qu'on est très reconnaissant. Donc, ça nous offre de belles opportunités.
Dr. Tony Ryman, practicing medical oncologist at the St. John Regional Hospital, research professor at UMB St. John, research scientist at the Atlantic Cancer Research Institute, assistant dean of research at Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, and the Canadian Cancer Society research chair.
I'm focused mostly on 3 types of cancer: multiple myeloma, lymphoma, and lung cancer. And we have clinical trials ongoing in each of those areas, and we're doing research studies in the laboratory in each of those areas, looking at new therapies and molecular markers, biomarkers that we can use to identify which treatment might match best with which patient. I conduct my research at the St. John Regional Hospital, where I see patients with cancer. My research revolves around them and how to improve their care through research. So we enroll our patients in clinical trials right in the hospital. And the patients also volunteer to provide information about their course of their care and their outcomes, along with samples of their tumor tissue, blood samples, and other samples for us to study in the lab to better understand the cancer in order to find better ways to treat it. Every day in the clinic, I'm seeing patients who are faced with problems about how to better treat their cancer. We certainly have lots of room for improvement in patient outcomes. So, my research is focused on, better treatments for our patients. So, We're always looking for patients to enroll in research studies of newer, better approaches to treatment. And my focus is on new drug therapies for cancer. In the lab, we're studying new drug therapies that might be brought to the clinic, and we're looking for ways to analyze biological samples from cancer patients like blood or tumor tissue in order to use that information to determine better ways of developing drug therapy for the patients, or better using the drug therapies we have. There are two major sources of funding for my research. One is funding agencies like government agencies, including the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation, and health charities like the Canadian Cancer Society, which is one of the major funders of my research program. The other major source of funding for my work is industry. So as a medical oncologist, my research revolves around the drug therapy that we provide to our patients with cancer and how to improve that treatment. And so we work with pharmaceutical companies that are producing innovative new cancer drugs and try to find ways to bring those to the clinic and most effectively use them to treat our patients. Health research is the way to advance patient care and patient outcomes. So if we're going to improve our outcomes in New Brunswick, we need to be part of the solution, and that's research.
Dr. Rima Azar, Director, Psychobiology of Stress and Health Lab, Associate Professor of Health Psychology, CIHR and RPP, new investigator at Mount Allison University.
I've always been fascinated by human resilience in dealing with stress. I don't think this is surprising, given that I grew up in a war-torn country. When I started my undergraduate studies, I had a dream to save the world from tragedies. Over the years, I discovered research and I fell in love with it. Now let me tell you about the main project at my lab. We are in the process of following 300 pregnant women from early pregnancy until they give birth. This is a clinical study that integrates my postdoctoral and doctoral work. We examine if prenatal depressive and anxiety symptoms lead to low birth weight through immune pathways. Low birth weight is very important to study because it's the most significant indicator of a newborn's chances of survival, and it can have negative long-term health consequences. We are interested in immune pathways that lead to low birth weight and specifically inflammatory processes. We also study markers of inflammation in relation to smoking, for example, smoking during pregnancy or smoking in youth. So we use different measures, psychological, by questionnaires, or we take saliva samples, or we take blood samples. Sometimes we work with cord blood, for example, in the pregnancy study. So we combine all of these measures in most of our work. So far, we've had funding from the CIHR for the pregnancy study, and then we had funding, an operating grant from the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation that is allowing us to keep going with the study, and we are now about to push the send button to submit a larger grant application to the CIHR for the same study, and we're crossing our fingers. Funding health research is a big investment. It will surely give back to the community in terms of better health. This concretely will improve diagnosis and treatment of cancer, heart disease, mental illnesses, etc. Without sustainable, high-quality, funded health research, how could we promote healthy living and give hope? As Christopher Reeve said, when you choose hope, anything is possible. Let's choose hope by ensuring that funding for health research is not only a top priority, but also a big success story.
Dr. Michelle Johnson, Assistant Professor at l'Université de Moncton's École de kinésiologie et de récréologie. Director of the Healthy Driver Research Group, Research Director for the Cardiac Wellness Program, Cœur en Santé.
Notre recherche, présentement, c'est tout autour de la conduite sécuritaire. Les camionneurs sont intéressants parce qu'une population qui est un petit peu plus vieille, ils sont vers la mi-cinquantaine. C'est des gens, parce qu'ils sont assis pour de grandes périodes de temps, qu'on voit des maladies chroniques, comme le diabète, comme les maladies cardiovasculaires, à des hauts niveaux. Mais quand même, ces gens-là réussissent à être des conducteurs vraiment exceptionnels. Donc, c'est plus que juste l'expérience. Ils ont des aptitudes, ils ont un environnement social qui les permet d'être des chauffeurs exceptionnels. Puis c'est ça qu'on veut apprendre. So we have established now for the third year the Healthy Driver Research Group, and that's a lab here at the University of Moncton, which has a driving simulator. Simply because there are some things that we can't and don't want to try to do on the road. And because it's in a controlled environment, we can look at heart rate, blood pressure, stress responses. Particulièrement au Nouveau-Brunswick, on a besoin de faire face à une population vieillissante qui n'ont pas les moyens de transport nécessaires pour aller chercher les médicaments, pour interagir de façon sociale, pour aller rencontrer les petits-enfants. Donc, ça me donne une chance de travailler dans un domaine qui a des retombées, je pense, importantes pour notre province et pour plusieurs régions au Canada en général. So by working together, we get the critical funding necessary to answer questions. And more, especially in the last few decades, our funding is really oriented towards asking community-based questions around health, around work, around employment. We want to be able to answer questions that come from the citizens, from the population. And without funding, it's really difficult to do this. And more, the funding we get are in partnership with the community. C'est qu'est-ce qu'on a eu au niveau de fonds de recherche. Moi, j'ai été très chanceux. J'ai travaillé avec des grands groupes. Puis dans les 10 ans que j'ai fait de la recherche au niveau de la conduite sécuritaire, on a pu aller chercher presque 11 millions en fonds de subventions. Ici, à l'Université de Moncton, moi, je détiens à peu près 3 millions de subventions. Puis c'est quelque chose qu'on trouve vraiment excitant parce que ça nous permet de créer un laboratoire qui interagit avec d'autres universités à travers le Canada et à travers le monde. So I think the greatest accomplishment, although the funding is nice, is that we're actually trying to answer real problems for real people.
Dr. Stacey Reading, Associate Professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology at the University of New Brunswick, Fredericton, Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology Master Examiner, and Certified Exercise Physiologist.
The research that I do here would be broadly classified in probably exercise physiology in general. The use of physical activity and exercise programming, nutritional education, goal-setting types of behavioral modification to try and help older adults change from having a sedentary lifestyle to becoming more physically active. The goal of the programs is to, help prevent or delay or modify some of the effects of various chronic illnesses, especially chronic illness that's based in sedentary behavior. So as we get older, we tend to get a little less active. We start to find more reasons why we can sit down and watch TV instead of getting out and getting physically active. And over the years, that starts to play a toll on our health. And what we try to do is help people kind of get back into physical activity, get moving again, so that they can help take steps to improve their health so that they stay healthy longer. That's the primary goal. Take Heart stands for Take Healthy Eating, Active Recreation today. And the idea is that's what the things that you need to do. You need to take a little heart every day to help improve your health and keep mobile for as much of your life as possible. Part of the research program is really looking at how do we get this kind of physical activity programming and nutritional counseling available to people in their own community. Rather than them having to come to the university, we can actually go to the community, and it's fairly cheap, fairly cost-effective. The second kind of primary area of research that we do here is to look at vascular functioning, especially in people who have type 2 diabetes. For a lot of people who develop diabetes, one of the long-term consequences ends up being microvascular dysfunction in the skin, especially in the skin of the lower limb and in the foot. So we put it in topically, and so we've been looking at this approach as a way of supporting wound healing. It's not going to magically cure everything, but it certainly can help support, I think, wound healing. At least that's what we're hoping, and that's what we've been looking into for a number of years. So, you know, coming to New Brunswick and doing things like the health study, the obesity intervention that we've done, the Take Heart program, it allows me to take a lot of the stuff that I learned as an undergraduate, a graduate student, as a postdoc, as a research scientist, and then I'll start to be able to use it to actually maybe help people directly. Here we've actually, you know, we can actually maybe do some good for the health of people.
Dr. Anne Beaton, professeure à l'École de psychologie, titulaire de la Chaire de recherche du Canada en relations intergroupes à l'Université de Moncton.
Quand je leur dis ce que je fais pour la recherche, c'est vraiment essayer de trouver des solutions pour aider les gens qui viennent de groupes minoritaires, de trouver un moyen de pouvoir s'épanouir sur le plan de la santé mentale. Ce que je veux dire, c'est essayer de régler des problèmes qui surgissent quand ils font face justement à des problèmes de discrimination ou un traitement injuste à cause du fait qu'ils appartiennent à un groupe qui est minoritaire. Alors, grosso modo, moi, ce que j'essaie de faire, c'est de comprendre comment ils cheminent justement dans les fléaux d'un désavantage parce qu'ils appartiennent à un groupe minoritaire, puis comment on peut les appuyer pour qu'ils trouvent des moyens, justement, qui vont leur permettre un bon ajustement sur le plan de la santé mentale. J'ai eu justement l'occasion de travailler avec des collègues qui viennent à travers le Canada, puis qui s'inquiètent aussi en ce qui concerne les francophones vivant en contexte minoritaire. On s'est posé la question à savoir, ces jeunes-là, qui se sentent comme s'ils sont sous l'emprise de ces pressions-là assimilatrices, si on pourrait les dire ainsi, quels sont leurs recours en termes de soutien en matière de santé mentale? Je travaille bien souvent à l'extérieur de l'université parce que mon travail m'amène justement à travailler en étroite collaboration avec les communautés. Non seulement a l'occasion de faire une collecte de données dans la communauté, mais j'ai aussi l'occasion de pouvoir partager les résultats de ma recherche avec les gens qui ont fait l'objet de mes études, mais aussi avec la communauté dans son sens large. Moi, quand je reçois du financement, je le reçois surtout des agences subventionnaires, par exemple, comme les Instituts de recherche en santé Canada, et aussi le CRSH, donc le Conseil de recherche en sciences humaines du Canada. Alors, le financement en matière de recherche en santé est important pour le Nouveau-Brunswick. Puis c'est ce qui assure que la prochaine génération des jeunes chercheurs en matière de santé se dote du savoir-faire qui va leur permettre de contribuer justement à l'épanouissement d'une communauté en santé.
Dr. Christopher Gray, the Associate Professor in the Departments of Chemistry and Biology at the University of New Brunswick and St. John, the Adjunct Professor in the Departments of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the Université de Moncton.
The area that we're working in, there are a couple of areas that I think we are now getting quite a reputation for. One of those is working on the endophytes that are found within plants, and I do that in collaboration with John Johnson at UNB. And endophytes are microorganisms that live inside the plants. So we're at the stage now where we can isolate compounds that are biologically active from medicinal plants, but we don't really know whether the plant is producing those or a fungus living inside the plant is producing those. So we're looking at those two things in concert, and I think we're pretty good at isolating these endophytes and working on those. The other area I would say that we're doing really well with is the tuberculosis research, which we're doing in collaboration with Duncan Webster at the St. John Regional Hospital. Obviously, you know, there's an obvious need for new tuberculosis drugs. You know, it's a third of the world's population has tuberculosis, and we need new drugs to treat that. So we've actually developed, or we've optimized a bioassay that is allowing us to isolate compounds that are very good at inhibiting the growth of tuberculosis. Our research is mostly lab-based, but we're focusing on natural products from medicinally used plants. So, you know, we do a little bit of field work to collect those plants all around New Brunswick and the Maritimes, really. In the Canadian perspective, there's this massive amount of knowledge relating to the use of plants as medicines by the First Nations. They've been doing it for thousands of years. But that hasn't really been followed up scientifically as much as other areas of the world. So we're kind of working our way through these medicinal plants. We're looking at the endophytes that are in them, and we're seeing whether we can isolate compounds from them, which hopefully will become or inspire new drugs in the future. The mainstay of scientific research is the funding that makes it possible. You know, in Canada, I think we're in a very fortunate position in that science is funded very well. On a federal level, we've been funded by NSERC, but we've got more support from provincial funding through the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation and the New Brunswick Innovation Fund. We need provincial funding, which will allow our researchers to do the preliminary work and then let them get those really big grants at the federal level.
Dr. Gilles Robichaud, Associate Professor in Chemistry and Biochemistry at the Université de Moncton, Adjunct Professor in Biology at the University of New Brunswick, Associate Research Scientist at the Atlantic Cancer Research Institute, Associate Research Scientist at the Beatrice Hunter Cancer Research Institute, and the Adjunct Professor at the Université de Sherbrooke.
Our research primarily focuses on the signaling pathways that exist in cells that allow to control cellular processes and mostly cancer processes. So in other words, what we're trying to do is we're actually mapping the communication that happens in between the components within the cell that will actually dictate to the cell if it does transform into its cancerous counterpart. With today's technology, it's still surprising that we still not have found, or it's still not well characterized, what is supposed to happen in a normal healthy cell. So our job is kind of twofold, where we're trying to map out what is healthy, what is normal signaling, and what is aberrant cancer signaling. At the technical level, it's quite simple what we do. We consider cells, the mechanics of the cells will take the genes and we'll disassemble the genes, alternate different function of these genes, add new ones. In order for us to functionally characterize what these genes, what their roles are specifically in different cancer processes, we can then take these cells that have been genetically modified and observe their behavior, take them for a test drive, if you will, to see if they behave as a healthy cell or a cancer cell. So all of this fundamental research is necessary for us, first of all, to know how a normal and a cancer cell behaves at the molecular level, and also to develop new effective therapeutic approaches and strategies. In no way am I a one-man band. I'm really totally dependent on my research team, which is comprised of a research assistant, a postdoctoral fellow, a PhD student, 2 master's students, and 2 undergrad students. Our success is based on these collaborations and relationships that we establish, so we can actually build now these collaborative bridges with different people to advance health research discovery. We're really thankful for regional institutions and foundations, such as the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation, which have given us a chance actually to get our projects and our research programs rolling. So for New Brunswick, as a young scientific research community, we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Dr Mathieu Bélanger, directeur de la recherche au Centre de formation médicale du Nouveau-Brunswick, professeur associé à l'École de kinésiologie de l'Université de Moncton, professeur adjoint au département de médecine de famille de l'Université de Sherbrooke, épidémiologiste au réseau de santé Vitalité.
Mon programme de recherche prend place partout en communauté, étant donné qu'on fait de la recherche sur la santé de la population. On va effectivement dans la population, on ramasse des données auprès des individus qui font partie de la population, puis on amène les données ensuite ici, dans le pavillon J. Raymond-Frenette, sur le campus de l'Université de Moncton, qui fait partie qui abrite le Centre de formation médicale du Nouveau-Brunswick. C'est sûr qu'une grosse partie de mon travail implique l'analyse de données, étant donné qu'on recueille tellement de données qui viennent de l'extérieur au niveau populationnel. Mon travail consiste à faire beaucoup d'analyses statistiques, à interpréter ces résultats-là. Donc ça se passe beaucoup devant un ordinateur, mais j'ai aussi beaucoup d'interactions avec mes assistants de recherche, étudiants gradués, des collaborateurs qui viennent d'ici à Moncton ou qui se retrouvent partout au pays, même à l'international. Donc étant donné qu'on a accès aux technologies, pour faire de la vidéoconférence, les télécommunications, on peut faire comme ça des partenariats avec des gens de vraiment partout dans le monde. Moi, je me considère très chanceux de pouvoir mener mon programme de recherche ici au Nouveau-Brunswick, la province dans laquelle j'ai grandi. C'est sûr que la situation a énormément changé ici au Nouveau-Brunswick. Depuis maintenant l'arrivée de la Fondation de recherche en santé du Nouveau-Brunswick, les 2 centres de formation médicaux, on a aussi les régies de santé qui sont beaucoup plus activement impliquées dans la recherche présentement. Donc tout ça a fait en sorte que la situation de la recherche au Nouveau-Brunswick est beaucoup plus prometteuse qu'avant. Puis c'est maintenant possible pour moi de venir au Nouveau-Brunswick puis de mettre en place un programme de recherche qui est unique, innovateur, puis qui a une grosse influence sur la santé des gens partout à l'international, mais particulièrement au Nouveau-Brunswick. Donc, puis mener ce programme de recherche-là ici me permet aussi de contribuer à l'économie, donc pas juste la santé, mais aussi l'économie locale, étant donné qu'avec le programme de recherche, les subventions qu'on va chercher, on est capable d'embaucher des assistants de recherche, de payer des étudiants gradués aussi. Donc, c'est ça que ça permet, tout le financement de la recherche en santé au Nouveau-Brunswick.
Dr. Stephen Lewis, Assistant Scientific Director at the Atlantic Cancer Research Institute, Adjunct Professor of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the Université de Moncton, Adjunct Professor of Biology at the University of New Brunswick, and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Microbiology and Immunology in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University.
My focus is on looking at breast cancer as well as the underlying molecular mechanisms of other types of cancer. My background is in understanding how cells make proteins, and we're looking at what happens to change the production of proteins in breast cancer cells. And when we were doing that research, we actually had a very exciting result that showed that when we change how proteins are made in the cell, we actually change the properties of the cancer cell. A lot of cancer cells are in a solid tumor. When we dysregulated the production of proteins, we caused those cells to become migratory, and that would allow us to look at metastatic breast cancer. So we're actually understanding how breast cancer cells become metastatic and move to other portions of the body. Our research is uncovering some really interesting changes that occur in the breast cancer cells, and we hope to use the knowledge that we gain from looking at those changes to develop better therapeutics or diagnostics for metastatic cancer. I have a great team that I get to talk to and interact with every day. I get to go into the lab, see their results, talk to them about the experiments they're doing, help them develop the right experiments and ask the right questions so that we can better understand diseases like cancer. I've received funding from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, both for my project as well as for myself as a new investigator. I've also had great funding from the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation Atlantic Chapter, who are funding my research into metastatic breast cancer. Those have been great accomplishments, and our breast cancer project has been very successful. We recently have discovered, as I mentioned, that when we change how proteins are made, it allows the cells to become metastatic, and that research was recently published in the journal Oncogene and has been well received by the field of cancer research. It's important that we have research on the ground here in our hospitals and at our universities, and funding that research is critically important, and that we can continue to explore the research avenues that we've developed, particularly into diseases like cancer and cardiovascular disease, as well as in the social sciences in the province. I was really surprised and excited about research that was going on here in New Brunswick, and that was one of the things that attracted me to this area. And because it's a small area, I have the opportunity to collaborate with lots of other scientists very easily, not only within New Brunswick, but also my colleagues in Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. So the Atlantic research community is a very tight-knit community, and that affords me lots of opportunities to collaborate with other researchers and push my research and their research forward much faster.
Dr. Shelley Doucette, Assistant Professor, Department of Nursing and Health Sciences at the University of New Brunswick, St. John, Adjunct Professor, Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, and Affiliate Professor, College of Health Disciplines with the University of British Columbia.
So my program of research involves two streams, and the first is around interprofessional education, and that involves different health professionals from different professions learning with, from, and about each other in order to gain the skills that are required to practice within interprofessional teams. So that's one stream. Another stream of my research is around interprofessional practice. And this research involves evaluating team-based care in practice-based settings. So both of these areas of research are really around improving collaborative practice and ultimately patient outcomes. One of the projects that I've been working on and focusing a lot of my energy around is an Atlantic effort to address the call from CIHR to develop a national community-based primary healthcare network. And so this research involves intersectoral partnerships with researchers, clinicians, patients, and decision makers. And one of the major benefits of being a health researcher in New Brunswick is that all of these stakeholders are readily accessible. Having all of these stakeholders collaborate in our projects, it actually allows me as a researcher to do evidence-based research that's able to transform the way healthcare is delivered and make the healthcare system more collaborative, patient-centered, and efficient. Since I joined UNB in 2010, I've had the opportunity to establish several interprofessional education and practice research projects that are inter-institutional and also international. And I guess one of the major benefits of being a health researcher with UNB St. John is that I'm within walking distance to collaborating with a variety of partners across institutions, including Dalhousie Medicine New Brunswick Community College, and Horizon Health Network. This partnership is often referred to as a Tucker Park Collaborative, and these partnerships provide the building blocks that are necessary for interprofessional education and practice, and they also are a living laboratory for my program of research. So there's been a lot of funding that is coming out for community-based primary health care, but one of the issues is the need to have matching funds to support this research. So we've been really fortunate to be working closely with the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation and helping us to secure these matching funds to support our research in this area.